All right, guys, it has been a long time and I missed you all. I'm really glad to be quote unquote joining you. If you're watching this, that means you're watching the pre-recorded lecture. We missed you in the Zoom class. I will go ahead and say that remember those Zooms are a lot more effective than these videos because you get to listen to the information real time. You get to hear your peers' questions on the Zooms and you get to ask questions yourself. But if this is what you've got to do, then I do understand, although I will say I think the Zoom have a little bit more of a meaningful learning experience. To kind of review what we've already learned, though, before spring break, we're going to learn about the different ecosystems in North Carolina. Remember, an ecosystem is an area, given land, wherever it is. They can be big, they can be kind of small. They can be really small, actually. They can be like the size of a what are they called? A tree knot where the water will stay and it's a little pool that could have a whole ecosystem in there. But that's a topic for another day. Remember, ecosystems include both abiotic or non-living things and biotic or living things. We're going to go through a couple, or actually quite a few, of the North Carolina ecosystems, and we'll separate them based on the three regions of North Carolina. Starting off in the western corner of North Carolina, let's look at the mountain ecosystems. The very first one we're going to learn about is called the bald mountains. Are plants and animals that are typically there. We've got blueberry bushes like what you see down in the right hand corner, and our sparrow, which you see that's the bird right there. Why are they called bald? Because they don't have any trees on them. Go figure, or the very top of them don't have any trees. I'm not sure. Before you ask, I don't really know why they don't have trees there. Perhaps the altitude is too high for the trees to grow, although I'm not really sure either. But they are called bald because they do not have any trees on the top of them. Our next ecosystem, let's see, is called a spruce fir forest. Spruce and fir are two varieties of pine tree. You can see the red spruce right there on the right hand side of the screen. And then you can see what that ecosystem might look like at the base of the mountain right there on the top left-hand corner. The threats to our spruce and fir forests include urbanization, I'm eating dinner, or the building of cities, as well as invasive species. We're going to learn a lot about invasive species later on in the week, or specifically on Wednesday and Thursday. But invasive species are any species that are non-native. One of the things that we'll learn on Wednesday and Thursday is that they usually have no natural predators, which means their populations grow without check, meaning they have a large population and it can cause devastating effects on the ecosystem. We'll talk a little bit about the invasive species that we see. Some common ones that you might know of are kudzu, or the vine that ate the South, as well as the red fire ants that we have outside. Those are invasive species. They weren't originally from here. They were from Argentina, if I remember correctly. And our owls are also some of our organisms that live there. Here's some examples of owls. They don't all look the same, but they do have those debatably creepy looking eyes that don't really blink. Kind of scary if you ask me, but that's okay too. And then we have a mountain bog. Bog means swampy, as you can see right here. You can like bog down a truck. That means your truck gets stuck. Generally, it's because the ground's too wet or there's too much sand. It won't move. A bog here means that it's really swampy, really wet soil. Swampy soil generally means that it's poor in nutrients, which is why we see a lot of our carnivorous plants in bogs or swamps, like what you see here in the middle of the screen. I'll circle it for you. This is called a sundew. This is one of the carnivorous plants that are really common in your area, and you can probably find in your yard if you look hard enough, especially right now because they actually have little white flowers coming out of the top of them. This is called a sundew. If you can see those little droplet-looking things, that is actually sticky sap, and it will attract the insects will get stuck, and then the carnivorous plant will start to digest that. If you look on the bottom right hand corner, those are pitcher plants. You can see they're also flowering, like this right here is a flower right here. These are hooded purple pitcher plants and yellow pitcher plants. Purple, yellow, hood because they've got that thing over the top. The hood helps protect the inside so that their digestive enzymes inside of it that the plant produces aren't watered down when it rains. It protects it. And then also our turtles right here. And I just wanted to show you, I found this really cool site. If you're interested, I'll email it to you, but this is called a sea turtle camp, not what we're looking at though. It actually has a list of all the kinds of turtles that you might find in North Carolina, like our common snapping turtle. Those are the ones you want to watch out for. They will bite when disturbed, although they're generally not that aggressive until you disturb them. So my key takeaway here is don't disturb a snapping turtle because they do have quite a powerful bite, probably strong enough to bite off your finger, and definitely it would hurt if they got you. So don't mess around with a snapping turtle. We've got other kinds of turtles like this bog turtle right here. Chicken turtle, never seen before in my life. I've also never seen this diamondback turtle, but I wish I had. They look pretty cool. Eastern box turtle, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Remember, those are the ones where their front snaps up so they actually shut themselves in, their heads. Painted turtles are really common. Red belly turtles, if I've ever seen it, I didn't really know. This is, I don't know what that kind that is. Never seen one of those either. A spotted turtle, never seen one of those, but I think it would be cool to see one. We've got a yellow belly slider right here. Those are super common. And then one of my favorites down here is the musk turtle. They actually stink really, really bad. I found one when I used to work at a summer camp, and we called him Pebbles, but he smelled terrible. They are really common in swampy areas. Okay, so, and then the last mountain ecosystem is called the Cove Forest. Our plants and animals that live there are red fox and the rhododendron, which is this purple flower right here, and you actually get a nice pretty picture of the Blue Ridge Mountains right here of North Carolina in the background. Threats to this ecosystem, again, are those invasive species or the species that do not normally live there, so they're non-native. A native species is one that's always been there. Invasive means that they were brought there or transported there some way. Moving on, do you remember what this region in the middle of the state is called? This actually includes most of our major cities like Raleigh, I lost them. Raleigh, Winston-Salem, Charlotte, and Durham. This is called the Piedmont, if you remember. Our Piedmont ecosystems, the first one is called the Messick Forest. Our animals that live here are box turtle. Remember those awesome guys. Actually, this flap right here and right here will snap shut if they were to pull their arms and head in. And then the eastern hemlock, which is this pine tree right here. Threats to this ecosystem are fragmentation. We haven't really talked about fragmentation, but that is where humans come in and they'll build roads or cities, and it actually breaks the ecosystem apart. And that doesn't seem super dangerous, but if you think about it, if I plant a city right in the middle of this ecosystem, how are the animals going to get from one place to, like, one part of it to another without going through the city? Humans are definitely a threat to this ecosystem. By the way, just so we know, I've talked about this before, I think, but this guy right here is a male box turtle because he has red eyes as well as this red pigment on his skin right here. This one we know is a female because she has brown eyes, and their shells, this one will be redder typically, although this doesn't look like it in that picture. And then our sandhill region, which debatably is kind of where we live, but we live right on the edge of the sandhills. It's like Fayetteville area. We have the red salamander, which is really cute right there. Salamanders are amphibious. They diffuse through their skin, so if you find a salamander, it actually means that your ecosystem is pretty healthy, because remember, we didn't talk about it, we will, when our species that diffuse through their skin are very prevalent, or we have a lot of them in an ecosystem, it tells us that it's healthy, because if they diffuse things through their skin, they can diffuse pollutants as well. So if we have a lot of amphibians, like the salamanders and frogs, we know that our ecosystem is generally healthier because they're able to live. Also, we find woodpeckers in this region, like the little guy on the bottom right-hand corner. The region looks a lot like our Longleaf Pine Forest, which we'll talk about in a second, but it's got a lot of pine trees, a very light underforest, just like our Longleaf Pine. They were formed once when the ancient oceans rose and then receded. So we talked about North Carolina's history. Remember, the coastal plains used to be covered in water, as well as a good portion of the state, a little bit of the Piedmont. And as the oceans rose, they eroded away the mountains, and a lot of that was dropped into the Piedmont region. So that's how we get the sandhills. It's generally characterized by really, really sandy soil. Get it? Sand hills. It's hills made out of sand. Our pine and our hardwood forest. So the forests that you see generally outside of your house are called softwood forests because they are mostly longleaf pines or loblolly pines. But these hardwoods are like our oak trees. So our dry oak tree, I don't know if any of you are interested in being able to identify trees, but our oak trees have leaves that look like this. Generally, they are what drop the acorns as well. A wood thrush, excuse me. It's a bird right here. He's got a very spotted breast, which I think is very pretty. He sings a really nice song too. One of the threats to this ecosystem is logging. So before you think that logging is bad, logging or timber companies done in the right way is not bad to the ecosystem. They generally regrow their trees because that's their profit. But the thing with a hardwood forest, the difference between a hard and softwood, hardwoods take a really, really long time to grow. So like our oak trees and our maple trees grow for a really long time. Our pine trees that we see out there, well, it takes a long time to form a pine tree. Like maybe it'll be mature in, I think, like 50 or 75 years, something like that. Our hardwoods take about 100 years before we can harvest them sustainably. So logging is a big threat to this because the more we log, the longer it takes for these hardwood forests to regroup and recreate themselves. So logging is a threat because it's often done unsustainably or in a way where we take too many trees, then nature can regrow or that we can regrow. And then our coastal plains. Remember, you live in the coastal plains. I live in the coastal plains. It was once covered by the ocean. It is generally characterized by flat land, and it goes all the way to the coast of North Carolina, including our barrier islands right here. Coastal plain, the Longleaf Ecosystem, and the savanna. This is where you live. The woodpecker, again, is present in this forest. You can see we've got longleaf pines or loblolly pines right here. It's characterized by a really bright a light canopy, so that means our under is pretty light and we have a lot of grasses there. There's also something called wiregrass that grows with longleaf pines. It's pretty cool, something to definitely maybe look into later. As well, longleaf pines are often, and loblolly pines are often harvested, again, for timber. Timber is a little bit of a threat to this ecosystem because, again, if you do anything unsustainably, it's not good. So you want to make sure that the logging companies are making mindful decisions when they're harvesting, perhaps harvesting only the mature trees, not the immature trees, so not clear cutting, things like that. As well, we've got the I always struggle with this one. Pokesin, it is a swampy, foresty area. Some of our typical organisms here are the yellow warbler, which is right here. Again, has a beautiful song, and a water snake. If you were in class with me, we would get out the snake guides right now, and I would show you the difference between a water snake and maybe a cottonmouth. So there are a ton of species of snakes in North Carolina. Only 6 of them are poisonous. The cottonmouth is what you would find here. Amongst the swampy waters, perhaps waiting to bite you, not waiting to bite you, minding its own business until you step on it and then it bites you. Threats to this are plant poaching. We find a lot of our carnivorous plants again in here because it's boggy soil. Those are often poached as well as other rare species. Maritime forests are organisms that we would find here are like our eastern red oak cedar, that tree right there, as well as our blue heron. The threats to this, again, are development as the coast becomes a more and more popular destination for living in cities. Where are the people going to go? They have to tear down the ecosystems to build a city. So often that is our threat to the maritime forests. And our very last one is the Carolina Bays, which, by the way, you might also live in a Carolina Bay. If you live at like White Lake or Bay Tree, you live in a Carolina Bay ecosystem. These plants and animals include the egrets, like the white and gray egret right here, as well as the magnolia trees. A lot of our bay trees, it's a magnolia bay tree. A lot of them are found in our Carolina Bays. These have confounded scientists. They don't exactly know how Carolina Bays form. I've got a video on the next slide that you can watch. They might think they think it's a meteor shower. They're not really sure. Some think it's giant fish spawning beds from prehistoric times. Others think it's because of how the ocean's eroded. No one really knows. I'll post a video about it if you want to see it, or maybe email me. But that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the lecture. I hope you learned a lot about ecosystems in North Carolina. I will catch you all tomorrow. Have a great day.